So the main lever for Gen Z's comeback is the failure of our institutions from one reason or another. They failed and Gen Z has stepped up, or they failed and they've crushed all the people who were depending on those institutions for life, for meaning, purpose, etc. And so this is the driving force. This is the thing that has really propelled Gen Z into action, and what is leading to the positive side of Gen Z doing really well, and also what is leading to the negative side of Gen Z doing really poorly. And so the big realization of this, the red pill moment, if you will, for Gen Z, and for a lot of my friends, the people that I know, thankfully, because they're all seeing this, is that they're figuring out that all of our institutions, again, the economy, the university system, the credit lenders, the student loan companies, the universities, the banks, like all the corporations, etc., they're all made of sand. They're all impermanent and they're all insufficient to living a good life. And they can't get out of their own way. They're kind of in this bulwark. They're going to keep going. They're going to drive forward. They're going to do what they do. A system, one of my favorite quotes is that a system always exists to protect itself. That is no different than any institutions that comprise our country, whether it's our government or whatever people want to blame for it. And I know I kind of sound like a leftist throughout all of this. I promise you I'm not. Again, I'm Gen Z, and Gen Z is the most conservative generation on record. And I think that is a reason for this, is that they have seen that the institutions that have existed, they have caused more harm to them than good to them. This is the first generation. I was listening to a podcast this morning. This is the first generation since George Washington that is going to be worse off than their parents in America. Financially, spiritually, lots of other domains. We are worse off than our parents were. And that has never happened before because, again, it's cultural suicide to do that, because if you push the punishment of your sins down to your children, to your children's children's, younger generations, whatever you want to call it, like that's about as sinful of a thing as you can do. And that's a really ugly truth about the way that our, society is working currently right now. And so what does this look like? So Gen Z has experienced this in terms of the systemic failure of COVID. I think COVID is the really big one. I remember Charlie Kirk was talking about this once, and I thought this was a really smart analysis, because COVID for Gen Z was harmless, essentially. And, I would argue, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I would argue that there's more harm from the vaccines that have been done to Gen Z than from the actual disease. And so they had no reason to mask, to stay away, to shelter in place, to do whatever. Like Gen Z has the best, just by nature of biology and genetics, they have the best immune systems, they have the best access to physical fitness, and their health is still relatively in shape. And so but they were still shunted into the same spaces that our older generations were. And we should have done this in some cases for sure, because older people, their immune systems are more compromised. Their bodies can't catch up and require quicker. We should protect our old people. And we did protect our old people, I believe, throughout the pandemic. But just because you treat everybody equally, you don't treat everybody the same. And the sin of the COVID era for Gen Z was we treated a 21-year-old like an 81-year-old in terms of the policies of COVID. And that touched every part of their formative years. And they're really resentful of that, as they should be. And they really resent the people that did that to them, that said, you can't graduate, you can't go to your senior prom, you have to do like a remote thing where you're like dancing inside of the Zoom or whatever. And like you can't go out for your 21st birthday and have a drink for the first time with your buddies. You can't, go out and, just hang out with people at a football game. We're going to shut down those events. We're going to, push you into these local areas. Everything you learn is going to be on a box, DoorDash everything, put it on Klarna, whatever you're going to do. And it robbed people of that. And there's a lot, I think I'm going to do a whole episode on this in terms of the economy that would happen from COVID, about how the wealth transfer that happened from the young to the old. We took a lot of, basically their earning years and shifted it onto the boomers and people that are older in our society, and they got richer and the young got poorer, which is a catastrophe from all metrics, but I digress. And that touched every part of their formative years, And so it ruined a lot of the attitudes and a lot of the rites of passage for young people were taken away, and they were taken away from me. I never got to graduate college. I did graduate college, quote unquote, but I never got to say goodbye to my friends. I never got to graduate. I never got to do that. And that really hurt. And I knew a lot of people that really hurt. I have friends younger than me, older than me, etc., that never got to do anything in that regard. And it was really harmful to a lot of people. And they're pissed off. Like Gen Z is pissed. And they're really resentful of all the people who said, hey, this thing is just a cold, but you can't go, again, you can't go out and do anything. You can't meet people. You can't go on dates. You can't do whatever. So shut up, wear a mask, and get the Fauci ouchie, essentially. That's kind of what we were told. And contrary to popular belief, it's not just the pandemic that I think is there. People are shifting out of, etc. It is everything that Gen Z is questioning. As mentioned, everything is up on the slaughtering table. I don't know what they call that. And I think the Bible, they had the altar for slaughter, the calf for slaughter, whatever. It is Congress, it's the government, it's corporations, it's the medical establishment. And so what this is really built up into, and it's bubbling into now, and we're seeing it from whether it's the election of Zoran Mamdani, whether it's the Trump thing and young men getting behind Trump, whatever. Gen Z is slowly becoming the first generation that is the most anti-authoritarian and anti-authority we have ever seen. And this is going to maybe fly in the face of the baby boomer narrative, because the boomers are like, oh my gosh, like we were at Woodstock and we were the civil rights generation and we were the hippies and everything like that. It's like, okay, look at the results of black people over the last 50 years. What did you do about that? Look at what you've done for poor people. And so the boomers, and the sin of the boomers throughout this whole thing was that they have kind of LARPed live action role play, for those who aren't familiar, and they've cosplayed as this kind of like, Tim Dillon has this great quote where he's like, the boomers were like they say that they're the most progressive generation ever, but they were really just selfish drug addicts. And that's true. They were just kind of, people, mostly white, by the way, who just kind of, smoked weed and said, I hate the Vietnam War, whatever. And sure, I agree with Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or John Lewis or whoever on this thing or whatever. But after that happened, they just kind of took all the credit that was done largely by non-white people in that way. This is a white boomer issue primarily. And they just kind of appropriated that onto themselves and said, you know what? I earned this. I helped elevate black people. I helped poor people, whatever. So therefore, I'm going to just coast on all the things that the greatest generation did, and I'm going to ride my way into the sunset. I'm going to take 2 vacations a year. I'm going to have 3 houses, whatever all this is. And so we've just seen so many lies about the boomers. And when you see Gen Z really starting to push back on all of the institutions that elevated the boomers, again, the embedded growth obligation economy, the financialization of the economy, the rise of corporate culture, the rise of everything really at the end of the day. And when you see the Gen Z is saying, hey, I want to break this thing, like I actually want to break this thing, the boomers like, whoa, okay, like you're attacking us because we are the ones that have been the beneficiaries of these institutions, even though we say that we're against them. They're actually not. They're lying about that, which is why you hear all of these lies from older folks onto younger folks, because you have all of these things that are getting spun out of them to protect the institutions that protect older people. And so you are not allowed to question the credit card companies. You're not allowed to question the universities. You're not allowed to question the government. You're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z. All of them, by the way, that are run mostly by boomers, just because their age. All the banks are run by boomers. All of our politicians are boomers for the most part. Everything. And I don't want to make this an anti-boomer thing. Like, I'm not an ageist, I swear. But it's like, this is the reason behind all of this stuff. And so what this leads to, in my estimation, is a really interesting question, especially because whether we like it or not, this is just the way that our culture and our society works. Like, Gen Z is going to inherit the earth, essentially, from all this. So can our institutions recover? Can they ever recover from just the shellacking they've taken in recent years? And I think COVID was the one that broke the camel's back. Like I said, I mentioned a couple of these. We've had like these, I call them gin breaks. So Eric Weinstein has this thing called the gated institutional narrative that basically says like, hey, don't see what you see here, all that kind of stuff. Like the 2008 financial crisis was a big one. The Iraq war was a big one. The Trump election was a big one. AI is a big one. But I really think that COVID broke it open for everybody, because people were like, this is so insane. This is so authoritarian. This is so X, Y, and Z here. And I've really struggled a lot with this, because I don't know if we can recover from this, if our mainstream institutions can ever recover from this. And there are positives and negatives to that, obviously. My default answer to that question has been yes. I do think our institutions can recover. But mostly because I can't imagine a world without them, by the way. Like, I mean, if we were to just say like Tucker, he made this hilarious point, his turning point speech. Like, what if everyone just stopped paying their credit card bills? And, not permanently, I don't want to take out these companies, but what if we just brought them to their knees and said, stop and drop the interest rates and forgive all the debt or something? And obviously, there's a lot of nuance around that conversation. I agree mostly, but regardless. But I'm not so sure anymore. I'm really not sure anymore. Like, what happens if we do stop paying our student loans? And we stop paying the credit card companies, and we elect people like Zoran Mamdani to be the mayor of the flagship city of this country. And so what I'm beginning to realize is that our institutions that we've so depended on are so despised in our current moment. They are so hated by everybody, by young people, most importantly, that we almost can't help but let them go by the wayside. We need to let them die. And I think a lot of them are dying. Like, I think a lot of this stuff is going to be a lot more permanent than we think. And do I know if that's a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I am a big fan of I'm a burn it down person, but only if we have something to replace it nice and neat on the shelf or wherever we're going to say. Like, I'm totally fine with if we want to shred total government agencies with Doge or whatever else, fine. But what are we going to have in replacement for that? So I don't know. And this has kind of led me to my new conclusion about this, which is that I do think that the vast majority of these institutions are done. I think they're done. I think the biggest example of this is the universities. I think college in America has taken a almost irreconcilable hit over the last 5 years. I truly do. I think that the quote-unquote elite universities, I think they're cooked. I think Harvard's done. I think Yale's done. I think, my cousin goes to Cornell Law School. I think they're done, unfortunately. Hopefully he gets out and gets a good job as a lawyer and attorney before that. Hope that happens. So shout out to him. But I think they're done. And done, what does that mean? Done in the sense that they are going to need to capitulate and compromise the demands of the younger generation. And they're going to say hey, we kind of are, in the case of the universities, we kind of are like a hedge fund with an education department attached to it. And yes, we have a $50 billion endowment, but that's nothing to see here. We don't, do whatever and all that kind of stuff. And we're not going to, stop the anti-Semitism on campus. We're not going to do this, whatever, but nothing to see here. And so, and they're going to need to do this to capitulate to the younger generation, not out of a sense of entitlement, but out of a sense of survival. This is vital that we get this right. For me, my children are never touching university. They are never touching a public school system. They are never working for a corporation, if I have any say about it. And they are free to do what they choose, I suppose. I don't have children yet. I want them. But they are going to need to come back to Gen Z and say, hey, we screwed this up. We're sorry. And we're going to have to fix this. And so this is a good thing, I think. This is the power of a democracy. This is the power of a republic, a citizenry. Gen Z is enacting and wielding their power as citizens should, by demanding that they be served by the institutions that they fund and that they prop up, not in the inverse. A government does not exist to leech off the citizenry. A government exists because of the citizenry. A citizen, which all of us are if we're listening to the United States, and you are in a separate country, at least hopefully you are, which is okay, then that power needs to be realized, and it needs to be funded and propped up. And if they don't, then those institutions do deserve to get burned. I'm not afraid to say this at all. I mean, those institutions deserve to die if they don't do what they should be doing, which is empowering the people who depend on those institutions to get what they want out of the institutions. It's the Chesterton's fence argument. If it doesn't have a place, probably we should tear it down.